I want to conduct a short masterclass into wicket keeping because wicket keepers have probably one of the most underappreciated roles in cricket. If you do your job well, no one's going to talk about you. If you're in the news, then you've probably messed up. So, what I want to do with you is I want to dissect the role of a wicketkeeper, the physical, mental skills that you need, and the technique as well. And then hopefully create a very short masterclass around it. Are you up for the challenge?
Yeah, go on.
Let's do it. So, first, let's talk about the technique. There are so many variables that go into wicket keeping. There's the position of your hands, your head position, footwork, body stance, how you rise with the ball, transfer of body weight. So many different variables. You have often said that there are negotiables and then there are non-negotiables in wicket keeping. So first, let's start with the non-negotiables. What are some of the key aspects that every wicketkeeper needs to have in their technique? And then what are some examples of wicketkeepers who did that well?
Well, okay, let me just start by saying that when I started keeping, or till my generation, uh, even though keeping's always been known as this thankless job and a very specialist job, blah, blah, blah. But I think that was one facet of this game which took a long, long time to evolve.
Mhm.
So what I was taught growing up, I'm sure was what was taught to Godfrey Evans as well. It was the same 100-year-old, get behind the ball, footwork is important, your hands, soft hands. And a lot of that was very cliched because we never had back then keep as in specific keeping coaches. So would have general coaches who would just, their coaching of wicket keeping was very, theoretical, what they've heard, and they would
Yeah.
pass it on. So we've been lucky to have some really good keepers in the past, but then most of them are very natural, whether it's Syed Kirmani, whether it is Nayan Mongia, Kiran More, very natural, right? But it wasn't very organized, the whole coaching bit. It wasn't broken down into smaller bits like you do with bowling and batting, So it wasn't talked enough about keeping as a facet. And that's where I think what I figured out during my course of playing, that the things that I learned was not correct, was not right. It is all right to go by with, but then when I moved up a few notches and played international cricket, my technique wasn't right. It took me a while, and it took me a coaching course which I did myself. 2002, I came to England to play professional cricket, and I did my coaching badges while I was playing. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to coach myself. And that was when I started thinking like a coach. And that's
Gotcha.
when I realized keeping is such a, a, unorganized facet. And then, so I thought about these non-negotiable and negotiable bits that we're talking about. So the non-negotiable bit is your balance, and there are ways of getting to it. So, we were told, okay, feet shoulder width apart, and that was it. But break it down and say, balance. And balance could be shoulder width, could be narrow, could be broader. So basically broader. So balance is one thing, your head position, right? We were told to, footwork is important. You got to move well. If you dive, that means you're not a good keeper. You're not moving enough.
Yeah.
But we tend to forget the more we move, the more our head moves and our eyes move. The stable we are, our eyes are stable as well. So, so head position, you can call it head position. You can, say less movement, because as keepers, we keep talking about footwork. You really don't need to move much. In spinners, offside, half a step, down the leg side, 1.5 step. Fast bowlers, you don't have enough time to move more than a step either. Side, a little more than a step, step and a half, maximum 2 steps. That's about it. So you don't really need to move a lot if you think about it. But the focus was always move, move, move. But the more you move, the more your eyes move, the less balance you would have and less, judgment you would have. So 2, and third is hands, good hands. And those good hands could be either very soft like MS has, so you don't have to take back. The reason that he's so quick taking off the bails is because he got naturally very soft and padded hands, and he doesn't need to give. He can just gather there and take the bails off. If you don't have naturally soft hands or padded hands, and then you can work on it, but then you got to give a little bit, so that whole, the hand thing. So basically these three things, and then you can work around the other things, footwork and stuff like that. I would just, and the other important thing with coaching that I feel is there is a tendency to complicate things. Yes, it is a complicated sport. It is a very complicated sport, like any other sport. But the thing is, the idea is to uncomplicate complicated things. You can't go to an 8-year-old and talk about angles. You can't talk about other things, more technical things. So you've got to uncomplicate those things. So you can get into a lot of complicated stuff and throw jargons and stuff. But the idea is to uncomplicate and simplify things. And that's the reason you just stick with those three things, and then you find how to get to those three things: the balance, the stability, stable head, good hands. How do you get to that is important. And the other thing, if I may add, is positioning. You got to be in the right position, which call it footwork or whatever, but get into a good position.
Definitely crucial aspects of your technique. Let's quickly talk about the negotiables as well. Ridley Jacobs, the former West Indian wicketkeeper, had once told you, "I get paid to catch balls. How I catch them is my problem."
No problem. 100%.
He's probably he's a good example of an unorthodox wicketkeeper. Another wicketkeeper who was pretty unorthodox is not a keeper many people have heard of. Name was MS Dhoni. I don't know if many people have heard of him.
Yeah,
Another
true.
one. Let's talk about some of the negotiables in wicketkeeping. What are some of these aspects of the technique that can be different across wicket keepers, and examples of keepers who did that as well?
I think MS was, obviously Ridley Jacobs was extremely unique. And when I say extremely unique, it's unbelievable how unique he was. So it's very difficult to kind of emulate him and use him as a benchmark. But MS was unique, but very repeatable. So you can actually follow him, what he does, because that's exactly what he's done. And this whole idea of me getting into the negotiable, non-negotiable to a great extent is to kind of break down MS's way of keeping. If you see most of the keepers now, you see MS in them: broader stance, limited footwork, enough to get into the right position, splitting your body from your hand. While we were growing up, we were only told get behind the ball. But the idea is if you get behind the ball, Indian subcontinental pitches, first-class cricket, when the ball doesn't bounce over your hips, it is fine. But the moment it starts bouncing and it comes to your chest, you're stuck there. You got nowhere to go. So you got to separate your hands from your body. So your hands move a little differently than your body. Yeah. Again, things that you could see in MS's keeping over the years, things that he's moved. Those soft hands. A lot of keepers nowadays want to just grab it and take the bails off, which is fine. But there is, again, a process behind it. We got to figure out whether you can, whether you have those aspects, in you to do that or not. So I think MS is an absolutely, was a game changer as far as keeping is concerned. Absolute game changer. I always follow a lot of Australian and English keepers who are traditional. They produce really good keepers, especially English keepers, more than Australian. And why I say English keepers is because Australian keepers, they do keep against spin, but predominantly, leave aside Ian Healy before that, there was a lot of, 80-90% or maybe more of that would be against fast bowlers, which is standing back. And standing back in Australia is good 15 odd yards back. So you have enough time. So it's very different. But in England, obviously there is lateral movement. There is a lot of movement post the ball post it's crossed the stumps. So one is that. Secondly, they do a lot of keeping up to the stumps against seam bowlers. You see a lot of these 110K bowlers in England and English cricket. through club cricket and above. So a lot of those keepers, they are very good, brilliant, standing up to the stumps as well. And that's where I think I learned a few things. Like I mentioned, coming to England, playing professional cricket and getting my badges. So yeah, I mean, you see a lot of that MS thing being replicated in modern day keepers.
So many aspects of the technique and how MS changed the game as well. I just love wicket keepers. It's such a physically taxing job, and even mentally taxing job. But somehow fast bowlers have put this myth out there that they are the hardest workers on the field, but in fact it's the keepers. Keepers need a better PR team is my conclusion out of it.
True, 100%.